Starting off with a bit of an atypical E-card deck, Speedrill. Atypical because it favors speed and efficiency over setup and consistency. Whereas most E-card decks run multiple evolution lines of Pokemon and range anywhere between 20 and 25 Pokemon per deck, Speedrill's just got the Beedrill line and some Lapras just in case you get a bad opening hand. Because of that, this deck is able to utilize the ball engine with higher accuracy, meaning that whenever you use a fastball, you know you're either grabbing a Kakuna or a Beedrill. The name of the deck can be a bit misleading as the goal really isn't getting a Beedrill onto the field as fast as possible. It's more of getting your setup as fast as possible, getting as many Kakuna onto the field as you're gonna need so that you can strategically evolve those Kakuna into Beedrill for the Venom Spray Poke Power. Just getting a bunch of Beedrill into play isn't going to do you any good. In order to utilize Venom Spray, you have to evolve your active Kakuna into a Beedrill, and when you do, your opponent's defending Pokemon is going to be paralyzed and poisoned. While this is an amazing power and it does put your opponent's active in a very difficult situation, you don't want to do it right away. You're not racing to just paralyze and poison your opponent's active. If your opponent has a Cyndaquil and you paralyze it and poison it, well, that's gonna last a turn because they're gonna evolve it next turn, which is gonna wipe away those special conditions. That's why I'm saying you do have to be strategic with your evolutions up into Beedrill. It's not like Kakuna can't fend for itself. It's got 70 HP, its Pokebody is reducing incoming attacks by 10, and you get automatic poison for 1 energy. It's got plenty to work with. But Beedrill isn't just about the Venom Spray. Needle Rush is a pretty outstanding attack on its own. 2 colorless energy, you flip 4 coins, and depending on how many heads you get, you're looking at anywhere between 10 and 100 damage. The damage output heavily relies on luck. Thankfully, you do have the poison to add on that little bit of extra damage in between turns and really put the pressure on your opponent in case you are just missing coin flips. But the free retreat is super helpful for when Beedrill starts to get a little bit of damage on it. You want to retreat so that you can move up a Kakuna, evolve, do the Venom Spray, hit with another Needle Rush. To ensure you get off as many Venom Sprays as possible to disable your opponent's active position, you do have help from Undersea Ruins, which will discard the Beedrill, allowing you to play another one from your hand onto that Kakuna. Then you can later recover those Beedrills from your discard using the Lure Ball. This deck is also maybe the best utilization of Retro Energy. Not only is it providing energy for a Beedrill's Needle Rush, it's also healing 2 damage off of that Beedrill before discarding it. This is why I keep emphasizing getting your setup as quickly as possible, not necessarily the Beedrill, because a lot of time what this is going to look like is free retreating Beedrill to the bench to move Kakuna into the active position, using Undersea Ruins or Retro Energy to discard the Beedrills on your bench. And if you don't have the Beedrill in hand to evolve your active Kakuna, you just Lure Ball to get it into your hand. Almost like you're just baton passing a Beedrill evolution from Kakuna to Kakuna and then discarding it again, so you can keep doing that. And you just Venom Spray over and over again to disable your opponent's active and just wear them down with poison and Needle Rush attacks. It's a pretty straightforward deck, but it does require a little bit more finesse than what it looks like on paper, especially given some of the unique challenges that this deck type brings, but we will get to those later. First, let's dive right into what the actual deck list for Speedrill looks like. We are starting off with Skyridge Weedle. There's actually 2 Weedles in Skyridge, and the choice is kind of up to you. I prefer the one that has 50 HP, just as a little protection against basic Fire-type Pokemon that can hit for weakness and deal 40 damage on turn 1 or turn 2. Plus, it's got attacks that give you a chance at paralyzing or a chance at poisoning your opponent's active. While you may not be looking to evolve up into Beedrill right away, you do want to evolve into Kakuna as quickly as possible, again just for protection against early game big hitters and fire types. And we'll be finishing off the playset of Weedle and the playset of Kakuna with a full playset of Skyridge Beedrill. And we covered most of the major strategy points in the intro. You do want to be careful in playing these Beedrill around your opponent's evolutions. That way, they're not just evolving up and getting rid of everything you've accomplished with Venom Spray. 3 copies of Lapras. I did run a build that only had 2 Lapras in it, but I kept running into situations where I just had a bad starting hand, and I had to dual ball into a Lapras and then set up the assist just so I could get the Oaks research or get an Apricorn Maker to really get the ball rolling. This deck is prone to mulligans for your opponent because there's only 7 basic Pokemon in this build, so the odds that you're going to end up with one in your opening hand are pretty low. But that's okay. Your opponent can take all the mulligans they want. It doesn't really disrupt your strategy. It'll definitely give them an advantage in getting their setup, but the entire point of this deck is to move so quickly that it disrupts your opponent's setup to where, you know, they're loading energy, they're evolving up, they're active, and then you hit them with a Venom Spray and none of that really matters because they can't do anything on their next turn. Because we're using the ball engine for Speedrill, you don't really have to rely as much on draw power and search power, which is why we're a little bit more limited on those supporters in this build. So you got 3 copies of Professor Oak's Research, 2 copies of Copycat, and 3 copies of Professor Elm's Training Method. Usually you would be seeing full play sets of all of these different supporters just because that's what you need to do to find and get the cards that you need. But because the ball engine is so reliable here, it's easier just to Apricorn Maker and then just play multiple forms of search from your hand. A few copies of Underground Expedition as well. That's a really informative card because after you look at the bottom of your deck, you don't have to shuffle up, and so you can kind of keep in mind what cards you have down there on the bottom. And then of course we're going to be running 3 copies of Apricorn Maker, which is going to be your major search and utility card. You play an Apricorn Maker and whatever it is that you're trying to find. So if you don't have Kakuna and Beedrill in hand, you're going to be looking for a fastball. Or if you're looking to just get more Weedle or a Lapras, then you're going to try a Dual Ball. Dual Ball isn't super reliable because of the coin flips, but you know, you're getting a basic Pokemon on average. Fastball is the more reliable source because, like I said earlier, you know when you're playing a fastball, you're either grabbing a Kakuna or a Beedrill. And because you're revealing cards from the top of your deck one after the other, that also just gives you knowledge of what you have in your deck. It gives you an idea of what you have prized so that you can kind of form your strategy around that. If you're looking in there and you're seeing like, oh shit, I prized 2 Kakunas, then you're going to have to adjust your strategy. Lure Ball is your method for getting those Beedrill back out of your discard and into your hand after you've discarded them from the top. I would suggest waiting until you have at least 2 Beedrill in the discard before you play a Lure Ball. Just in case you do hit multiple heads, you can fully utilize it. Town Volunteers is another method for getting back your Weedles and your Kakunas, since you kind of already have a way to get back those Beedrill pretty quick. Undersea Ruins just has a quick way to flip a coin. If you hit heads, discard that Beedrill, which then gives you the ability to Lure Ball it straight back and evolve another Kakuna on your bench. Now, there's a lot of moving parts that you can accomplish between Undersea Ruins, Retro Energy, Lure Ball, and just having multiple Weedle and Kakuna set up on your bench. Not that it's going to happen that often, but also keep in mind that you cannot attach Retro Energy to Weedle if you're trying to set it up for a future Beedrill attack. Instead, you're going to have to attach a Grass Energy earlier on, and then when you evolve up into Kakuna, then you can attach Retro Energy to that evolved Pokemon. And the rest of the deck's going to be filled out with basic Grass Energy. Now, because the e-card format's not really heavy on stadiums, you're pretty safe only running 2. Like, you can put down an Undersea Ruins and feel pretty confident that it's going to stay there for the rest of the game. And even though you are giving up a lot of mulligans to your opponent, it's not very often that you're going to be dealing yourself a bad, unusable hand. Every now and then you do get one of those scenarios where you're having to start with a Lapras, and all you have in your hand is like 2 Professor Elm's Training Method, a Town Volunteers, and then a bunch of Grass Energy, and it's not a lot to work with, but usually you've got at least 1 draw supporter that can help you draw into other resources. You've got at least a Dual Ball or a Fastball that is going to give you access to something pretty quick. Once you get the ball rolling, you can thin through this deck very quick. Even just playing Apricorn Maker, grabbing 2 balls, playing those 2 to grab 2 other things, like even that is significantly whittling down your deck so that your top draws are going to be better every turn. The real challenge does come when you realize that you have multiple Kakuna or multiple Beedrill in your prizes, and then you kind of do have to rush through how you're playing the game, just because you can't rely on your normal strategy of discarding those Beedrill and recovering them without extra Beedrill. I would say that the biggest challenge of playing this deck really is playing around your opponent's evolutions, because E-Card is all about Stage 1 and Stage 2 Pokemon. There aren't a lot of big basics, and so you do want to wait until the right moment to evolve up into Beedrill and get that Venom Spray on whatever the last stage of your opponent's evolution is. You don't want to be wasting it on a Quilava or a Kadabra. Playing that waiting game is kind of difficult, sitting there and watching your opponent evolve, from Larvitar to Pupitar to get those special darks attached on there. Like, that's pretty threatening to look at when you've just got a Kakuna sitting there and you're like, well, I hope I can poison them. But it's super satisfying when you do get that Beedrill in hand, you evolve up, you paralyze them, they're not going to do anything next turn, because also a lot of decks aren't really running any Switch or Gust type cards. There's Warp Point in this set, but not a whole lot of decks run it. Fire type matchups are very difficult for this deck, of course, and there are quite a few good fire decks in E-Card. You have Charizard to look out for, you have Houndoom, Typhlosion decks, your variants on Rapidash and Ninetales. It's a lot to have to look out for. I actually have a coverage build of this deck that I've been fine-tuning. That'll probably be a separate video in the future. Anything with a particularly high HP can also be a challenge for this deck, since the damage output itself is very dependent on coin flips. So even with the paralyzation and the poison, getting that chip damage on with the poison, it's gonna be a pretty rough run if you're only dealing, 30 damage every turn with Needle Rush. On top of that, I'll just say that a common downfall of this deck is missing those coin flips. If you're missing coin flips off of Lure Balls, if you're missing coin flips for your attack, even missing coin flips off of Undersea Ruins, those flips alone could cost you games. Full Heal isn't a super common card across decks, but anyone knowing that they're going into a matchup against Beedrill is gonna include Full Heal in their deck. Also, the most commonly run grass deck in E-Card includes Butterfree. A Butterfree on the bench is a hard counter to Venom Spray, which is one of the reasons it is the most commonly used grass deck. And that's about all I have to say for today about Speedrill. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What do you think about this build? What do you think about this deck? What do you think about that Skyridge Beedrill card itself? If you've got any E-Card request decks or cards that you would like to see in action, make sure to include those in the comments as well so I can get it chucked onto the list. Thank you so much for watching. Social media links are down in the description, and I'll see you guys next video. Bye.